Hey guys, it's Matt. If you want to follow the lineage of the one world system, it has to go through and you have to understand the ridiculous power of the East India Trading Company or the East India Company. Most people are aware of this, but not the extent of how this thing served the one world system and was a million times more than what people think. Oh, it's just entrepreneurs got together and started a trading company. They're really smart businessmen. Yeah, sure. It's a manifestation of the one world system that has been around here a long time and maybe has always been. If you want to follow the lineage of the minions serving the master system, the master overhanging not milk system, you have to understand the East India Trading Company. So, I listen to Bill Cooper lectures about Mystery Babylon and where it came from, and I don't understand any of that, and I don't care to understand any of that. It's interesting when I listen to it, but I'm more interested in its current manifestation out my window that's getting in our business every day. But this is somewhat recent, and we need to understand the East India Company. Of course, the one world system came through the Roman Empire. Almost all of official history is some sort of a fairy tale. The Roman Empire, of course, controlled the equivalent of 100 countries in terms of land, and then it just all fell apart. Mismanagement, I guess. They had to just go back to just Italy when it was 100 countries, and well, if it was falling apart, why didn't they just withdraw to the equivalent of like 30 countries? It's all, we know the story. Roman Empire, withdraw back, but the power then goes into religion and the Vatican, and then if you just follow it through, the one world system absolutely comes through the East India Company. That basically controlled the entire world trade, enslaved the Indian subcontinent, addicted a certain percentage of the entire country of China to opium, heroin, poppy, just little things like that, just, do it in their spare time, I guess. Let's just take a look at this, and then we'll talk more about, how this little part of history, the East India Trading Company, relates to the whole. But this is just more massive and more powerful than anybody can fathom. And this is where that real money comes from today. You're not the Zuckerbergs and Gates and Bezos, Dr. Evil. If you see a list of Forbes or Fortune, the richest people, that's just people that started a website. And people that created a little green blinking cursor and a DOS prompt, and they're worth 50, 90 billion. They're the richest people in the world. The old money, that they just lost it all. Names like Astor, Vanderbilt, Harriman, Rockefeller, Carnegie. Like any rich man, they just squandered it away. When we can see if you would have just reinvested dividends basically in a savings account, they'd be worth all these family names would be worth over $1 trillion today. If they just did what Warren Buffett did, all these names, they just lost all their money, but Warren Buffett just bought stocks in the late 50s and early 60s, and he just bought and hold, and he became worth 70 billion. Then he made some really smart business investments, but in the beginning he was just buying and holding. But Vanderbilt couldn't buy and hold. Harriman couldn't buy and hold. Carnegie couldn't buy and hold. I guess they just had to piss it away. Bought just a whole strip of brothels that weren't managed properly by Bell from Gone with the Wind, and they just all went out of business. So this is where the real money is today, guys. The people that that addicted a fourth of the entire country of China to heroin. A group of here through East India Company that basically took over the entire country of India, which is the size of a continent. This is where the money is today. Not Gates and Zuckerberg and the Nuevo Rich and these jerks that made a website that they'll show you that's the richest people. That's a joke. That's why they're puppets and clowns, and they run around talking about vaccines all day, showing their face all over the news. These are just clowns, useful idiots to this group. This is where the real money is. Real money came from today. So East India Company, known as the Honorable, of course, East India Company, blah, blah, blah. Originally chartered as the Governor and Company of Merchants of London, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The company ended up seizing control of large parts of the Indian subcontinent and briefly Afghanistan. The only ones able to do that colonized parts of Southeast Asia and colonized Hong Kong after the first Opium War. But it's just the East India Trading Company. It's just entrepreneurs. It's just the equivalent of like the Microsoft of its day. No, this is the outward manifestation to me of a one world system with many old ancient groups working together. This couldn't possibly be accomplished by, no matter what the fairy tale tells you, just entrepreneurism and, oh, this guy, he bought a ship. And then they bought 2 ships, and they have a whole fleet of Forrest Gump Jennies. And they were the only ones out looking for shrimp in the shrimping business. And when that storm came in and it destroyed everything, and the East India Company, through a series of Lemony Snicket's fortunate events, just happened to become the world's leading trading company. No, it's all a manifestation of the one world system, in my opinion. It would have to be, when you see what it was able to, quote, accomplish. I don't want to give it any props, but I don't know what any other words to use. The company ended up seizing control of large parts of the Indian subcontinent. Oh, that's it? That ain't nothing. India is the size almost of the United States. Where is it? Okay. The company rose to account for half of the world's trade. Half of the world's trade through the monopoly of the East India Trading Company and its offshoots, the Dutch and the French version. Half of the world's trade. And this is what's in Wikipedia. Maybe they had it all. Now, do you think, guys, before we go any further, do you think there'd be any money in that? Do you think there's any money to be made if you have a monopoly on, what, just trade between Boston and New York? No, a monopoly on world trade. The whole world? Yeah. Think there's any money to be made? Oh, they promise low prices, just like Walmart. They promise everyday low prices. They would never raise it, even though they were in the position to, because there was no other trading companies to go through. And if there was other trading companies to go through, they would be firebombed out, just like Cecil Rhodes, working with the Rothschilds, I'm sure bombed out anybody else that tried to get into the diamond business about 125 years ago. They received a royal charter by Queen Elizabeth I in December of 1600. Of course, it'd be an absolute monopoly. It's this little company growing via smart moves and entrepreneurism. It's nothing to do with a one world system. Let's see what it says here. By 1803, at the height of its rule in India, the East India Company had a private army of about 260,000. A private army of 260,000, 250,000. Twice the size of the British Army. Just smart moves, man. Whoever ran this company, we thought Jack Sparrow was causing this company a lot of problems. Captain Jack and all his shenanigans, thought half the company was after Captain Jack Sparrow. Savvy. But no, apparently Captain Jack didn't cause much of a problem because they had a standing army of 260,000 people. Army. Twice the size of the British Army. Now, this is bullcrap. Indian revenues of 13 million pounds. The equivalent of 229 million pounds. The equivalent of what Bill Gates and Zuckerberg make in dividend reinvestment and interest per year. That was their revenues, but they controlled basically the trade over the entire world. Nope. I think you better check your reference on that Wikipedia. It's bullcrap. The money we're talking about here, we're talking about the equivalent of trillions upon trillions of dollars in the purchasing power during that time. The company eventually came to rule large areas of India with its private armies. Oh, that's nice. It had nothing. It was doing it on its own, the crown, and they had nothing to do with it. They just this private company got out of control. No, they weren't working together. The whole one world system wasn't working together. No, that would never happen. No, they're just separate countries. Come on, man, look at this. Company rule in India effectively began in 1757 and lasted until 1858. Well, what should we do? Like they're planning in 1750. Well, what do we do next? We're the board. We call a meeting of the board of directors of the East India Trading Company. Yeah, Jack, do you have your hand up back there? You're going to contribute in this meeting for the first time. What should we do? Take over the Indian subcontinent. What? Take over the Indian subcontinent. You want to do that? over the next 15 years? No, the next 100 years. Well, shit. I like people that think big. That's not a bad idea. Put the plans together, Jack. Make a presentation like that little Peckerwood boy did in Shallow Hal to Mr. Shanahan. We'll see if the rest of the board supports your position. They have tiny little aspirations like that. The company's army played a notorious role in the unsuccessful Indian uprising, in which Indian soldiers in the company's employ led an armed revolt against their British officers. Sure. Here they'll tell you that East India took the side against the crown. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's legitimate Wikipedia. Okay. Despite frequent government intervention, the company had recurring problems with its finances. Yeah, sure. Imagine, here's the way to picture it, guys. Imagine there's only one computer in the world today. It's called Dell. And there's only one operating system in the world called Microsoft. Yeah, you find people outside Manila in the Philippines putting pieces together. They can build your own computer and a bunch of horse shit like that. People, little tiny things. But if you want to run the internet and run programs and run your Salesforce.com and all that, you need Dell and you need Microsoft. Do you think they would have financial problems? That's what East India Trading Company was. This is ridiculous bullshit. They had recurring problems with its finances. If you control half the world's trade, of course, what it says here, if you have an army of 250,000 men and fleets larger than most countries, you probably control all the world's trade. Half, they have to make it look reasonable. Or maybe the little pockets of trade running between Manila and Jakarta that they just didn't give a shit about. Fine, the world's a big place. But you'd have to be pretty retarded of a CFO to have financial problems. You see what I'm saying? All right, let's keep going. Let's do this quickly and get to the more important points, summarize the big picture. Blah, blah, blah. Formation, 1599. Here you go. I didn't even get to this yet. I didn't look at it one bit. It's going to be a fairy tale. Absolute fairy. In 1599, a group of merchants met and stated their intention to venture in the here you go, the pretended voyage. To venture in the pretended voyage to the East Indies, that which it may please the Lord to prosper, and the sums that they will adventure. What? They committed 30,000 pounds. They went door to door. For an investment of just 4 or 5 shillings a week, you can control half the world trade. Get off my doorstep and never come back. Nobody would believe that. They went door to door with a little cup, asking. They had to go to a bank. This has nothing to do, Matt, with a one world system or powers that have always controlled the world and continue to control the world. This is entrepreneurism. They saved up money bought their first Jenny. And, just as Forrest had a friend that, Bubba told me everything there is to know about the shrimping business. Bubba said, I know everything there is to know about the shrimping business. Well, the guy that started this, or at least the guy that financed it, he has a partner that knows everything there is to know about the world trade business. It's just like the Social Network. With Zuckerberg, he knew all about the coding. He could create Face Mash at 2 a.m. drunk on his computer in the Harvard dorms. And he needed Eduardo Saveron, just to give him a couple $100 to start. That's all it is here. Just when two people get together with complementary skill sets, like Bubba and Forrest, this is what can happen. You take over half the world. The crown, they had nothing to do with governments. There's nothing to do with kings. They just did it on their own. The adventurers convened again a year later on the 31st December, and this time they succeeded. The Queen granted a royal charter to George, Earl of Cumberland. Man, that guy must have made a hell of an elevator pitch to the Queen. Who's next? Send him in. No, it's a representative from the East India Company. The what? The East India Trading Company? What do they want? Well, they're proposing a fleet of ships that will eventually take over the entire world in terms of a monopoly on trade. I like it. Bring them in. We'll give them a knighthood right now. Charter the shit. Come on. It's all planned. It's all planned. 100 years in advance, probably. That's just the way it works. At least that's my belief. And then they created a governor and 24 directors, and then stocks and bonds. And he does talk about stocks and stuff through here. I don't know if we'll get to it, but this is, guys, this is where the real money is today. Sir James Lancaster commanded the First East. Did you ever notice all the names, at least in Northeast United States, all the names from the UK? It's incredible. I mean, Lancaster just, 30, 40 miles from here. 1601, aboard the Red Dragon, after capturing a rich 1,200-ton Portuguese attack. Well, this is just, now let's just get through here. Initially, the company struggled in the spice trade. They struggled with a complete monopoly from the Queen. There's like a 00 at the bottom of the monopoly. It says 007. What's this? A license to kill anything that gets in your way. That's what they had. We can develop our own fleet of army, our own navy, and group of assassins? Yes. And that's what they did. You don't just kind of like take over India by just moving in every other house. I mean, there's a strong arm here that's hardcore pipe hitting. I mean, nasty group. All right. All right. Company ships docked, blah, 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 1608. I've got, guys, and of the limit, when the end of this, you won't believe. Okay. And that will lead, the end of this will lead into a future series going towards July 4th of the, the whole July 4th American independence Easter Bunny story that I'll cover going into the 4th. And I'll leave you a little tidbit that'll blow your mind, which most people won't know about at the end of this video. All right, foothold in India. Got a little foothold. End up taking over the whole damn country. Expansion. Okay, let's go to the real important stuff. Oh yeah, just a little jaunt into slavery. Anybody surprised? A little jaunt into Japan. Of course, when you matter, if it's half the world trade, of course this is just comes along with it. Trade monopoly. All right. Basis for the monopoly, with which I'm going to believe, of course, everything Wikipedia says. The East India Company Army, their own army and navy. Expansion and conquest. Blah, blah. Oh, here it is. Opium trade. First Opium War, Second Opium War, and history of opium in China. Okay. Opium trade. Now, that guy that raised his hand in the back of the board of directors meeting, just take over the Indian subcontinent, he had another idea a short time later that was just as well accepted and adopted to, I don't know, addict, I don't know, 30 or 40 million Chinese, or maybe over 50 million Chinese to heroin, poppy, and opium. Poppy, opium, heroin, basically the same thing. Yeah, East India Company, they're going to set up the infrastructure to addict tens of millions of Chinese to heroin. And then, I don't think it's in this article, but then they're going to require, whenever possible, silver as return payment. You think there's any money in that? But look at this. In the 18th century, Britain had a huge trade deficit with China. Yeah, I'm sure. Just a huge trade deficit. You know what China was in the 18th century? I mean, it was Shaolin Kung Fu monasteries and people pushing rice into patties 6 feet, 6 inches underwater. There was nothing there, okay? If they had a huge deficit, it could have just been, we declare it all goes away. I mean, it's a joke. Therefore, it makes perfect sense. Therefore, this had to be done. In 1773, the company created a British monopoly on opium buying. Isn't that nice? In Bengal, India, by prohibiting the licensing of opium farmers in private cultivation. So they had to have these incredible entrepreneurs, they had to have a monopoly on heroin. And this makes the, Don Corleone and the 5 families of New York look like nice guys. It's like nothing. The monopoly system established in 1799 continued with minimal changes until 1947? What? I don't quite get that one. As the opium trade was illegal in China, company ships could not carry opium to China. Oh, I'm sure they were terrified. So the opium produced in Bengal was sold in Calcutta on the condition that it's to be sent to China. Oh, they're just going to go roundabout because they're afraid of these Chinese authorities that really didn't even exist, until 1900 plus whatever. Anyway, despite the Chinese ban on opium imports reaffirmed in 1799 by Jean, I can't pronounce it, drugs were smuggled into China from Bengal by traffickers and agency houses in amounts averaging 900 tons a year. 900 tons. 900 tons of opium and heroin into China. Do you think there's any money there? Okay, guys, so that you understand where I'm going with this. You have enslaving a portion of the whole Chinese population to opium and the poppy. You have complete control of the Indian subcontinent, India, the Silk Road, and per at least what it says in Wikipedia, you control half of the world's trade. And a company or an entity that control half could then, any little route that's profitable that they missed, they could take over that pretty quick too. The rum route from Puerto Rico to Miami, they could just do whatever they wanted. Can you see the amount of money that's here? You're talking about money in the purchasing power of the day that makes, you could combine Microsoft with Oracle, with Amazon, with Apple. It just wouldn't even compare. If you combined all of these major companies that we know of today, it wouldn't even equal one of these East India. But what's the story? That they had financial troubles, and then of course, if you go in with the research, which I didn't continue here, talked about more issues, financial issues, a disbanding, and breaking up, of course. But the breaking up, it's just like the Roman Empire. Where did it go? Where did all this power and influence go? It just went somewhere else. It didn't go away. Nobody lost any money. This is where when you come back and looking at the world's richest people on the Forbes list or the Fortune list and all that nonsense. If you would have been, and there's parts here I passed over talking about stocks and stock certificates in East India going back into the late 1600s. If you would have just held on to whatever wealth, the 50 people that the 50 highest people that control this East India Company, if you would have just held the wealth, it did nothing but basically keep it in the bank for whatever that would have meant through the 1700s, 1800s. Just kept it in the bank. Just kept it in the family. That you would have families worth trillions today. And I would say, I would say there were families worth trillions that relate back to this East India Company. And I say were because once you establish a worldwide Federal Reserve System that just can print up whatever it wants, whenever it wants, for any reason, and inject money anywhere, then you just no longer need to even carry your own money. It becomes, if you have a family name that goes back through East India Company, and maybe you're at the highest level minion, way above presidents and prime ministers, running the show in this world today, and the family money was $2 trillion back in 1950. Once you have the proper Federal Reserve System set up, all run through the private banks that you own and control, and your families have controlled, why would you even need a private account? You just take whatever you want, whenever you want, in an unlimited fashion. How many speedboats can you possibly have? These people want to remain somewhat in the shadows. They don't build homes, with 400 rooms. That's what Enron executives do. The first time they steal their first dividend checks from the investors that they shystered, they build these big homes and odes themselves, and assholes like Dennis Kozlowski get $6,000 shower curtains for Tyco. That's what the new money all runs around and buys the speedboats. I mean, the old money, it's all about power, and they get jaded and just want to influence mankind. And do the things to men and women that we've talked about in many other videos. But it's not, it's just basically, I would doubt, do they even have a bank account they can even point to? Why would they need to? They have unlimited access to any amount of money whenever they need it. Certain people in this world. I believe that. I mean, even if you don't follow the history I'm saying and don't buy what I'm saying, that if you would have been an initial shareholder in East India and did nothing but just keep the money in the family, you'd be worth trillions today. Even if you don't buy that, which I don't see how anybody couldn't buy that, because we're told Warren Buffett, he made his money just buying and holding stocks in the 60s and 70s. Just buy and hold. That's all you need to do. Go to $50 billion and just make the right investments. He didn't have this portfolio of businesses he owned. That's a relative recent thing. The last 20 years for Buffett was about buying and holding stocks. Well, what if these people, Buffett, I'm sure he has some rags to riches story, BS. I haven't even looked into it. Humble beginnings, I'm sure. I'm sure. What if, you just started buying and holding stocks in the late 60s with the amount of money that you got through your ancestors at East India Company? And Buffett could make that worth 50 to 60 to 70 billion. Well, that would, Buffett started out with, I'm sure, next to nothing. What if you started out with 900 billion with the buying and holding? You see, you get into the trillions very, very quickly. The whole story about Rockefeller is a joke. An article published 4 or 5 years ago in Forbes or Fortune, Rockefeller net worth. I've said this many times, and there's a book chapter on this, but I'm fascinated by it. And I'm fascinated why nobody can just put this common sense together. You guys do, but people around us just never do. Rockefeller net worth down to 11 billion, it said in the article. Well, it's a coded article to pull in the 11. That's the only purpose of it. But they just, I love talking about this. I really do. They just squandered their money because the breakup of Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller, in 1911, I believe it was. I'm pretty sure. Am I surprised at the date? No. The equivalent of what we're told, $350 billion in net worth. So that's 5 times Bill Gates, for example, in purchasing power when it was broken up. Now, when it was broken up, they didn't remove his ownership. He then got shares in Texaco, Chevron, Exxon, Mobil. Standard Oil still exists. Refiners like Merit. Every major oil company that you know of is basically a derivative of what broke up via Standard Oil in 1911. So this is Rockefeller. If all they did was nothing but reinvest the dividends and put the savings in a bank account, the net worth collectively for Rockefeller would be easily 1.5 trillion, more, much more, if they did nothing. They didn't buy any businesses, didn't do any ventures at all. They didn't invest in it. They just missed out on trend after trend. Zuckerberg can just do a website and become worth 30, 40 billion or whatever just from a website. But that whole .com boom going into the 90s, the Rockefellers just missed it. They had no financial advisors. They had no connections to Silicon Valley. They couldn't see any trends. They had bad astrologers. They just missed it. I'm saying even if the Rockefellers had literal retarded people running their finances, their net worth collectively would be over $1 trillion. But let's say they had real smart people that are connected. Do you think they had any connections to senators, Congress people, what bills would be passed? Do you think they had any connections through the mid-1900s and what, they probably had a few. Probably could have insider traded a few million times. And yeah, see, it's not what the Forbes or the Fortune article would tell you. Their net worth is just down to 11 billion. Oh, let me play the world's smallest violin for the Rockefellers. No, it's in the trillions, as is the Rothschilds and other these famous names and names associated with the East India Company and names that like, there's some that squandered. When I say old names like Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Harriman, Astor, Guggenheim, Strauss, that people went down on the Titanic. When I list these old money names, sure, some of them are going to have squandered and made bad decisions. But I would say most of them with their political connections, with their connections to how not only do they know how the systems work, they built the systems. So most of them are probably in the trillions. They probably simply all gave up because they're associated with the Federal Reserve banks, they probably all did give up their wealth. You look at the bank account, it says it's a Blutarski. It's probably 0.0. But they're associated with the Federal Reserve. Dad, I'd like to buy a speedboat. It's $700,000. I want to buy it tomorrow morning. It's a twin inboard outboard. Okay, here comes the money. Wire the money. You just boom, it just appears. Why would you have to maintain a bank account? See what I'm saying? If you can set up these systems, you wouldn't want to maintain a bank account that people could point to and say, oh, look, these people have been hiding their money. What influence do they have? You want to, but you make it believable. So as I'm thinking this through, Matt, you're just thinking this through. You haven't researched it. Where would research on the Rockefeller net worth take me? What use? It's all about using discernment and common sense and inner knowing to figure things out. And sometimes we'll do this on the fly. We'll do it in the comment section. Things that come back from this sort of video. But yeah, if you're Rockefeller, so let me take that back. Their net worth, in terms of anything you can point to, is 11 billion. It is 11 billion, because you have to make it look believable. That's just enough where people will buy it. Well, they just missed a lot of trends. They squandered some money. You know how it is, Matt. You can point to 11 billion, but that doesn't mean they don't have like a computer that's hooked up to the Federal Reserve. They can get whatever they need whenever they need it. I believe that. I really do. Again, Rockefeller, if you just did nothing but play croquet in the backyard, just reinvest the dividends and put it in the savings bank, 1.5 trillion from 1911 to now. Just follow Warren Buffett's moves. Be worth 4 trillion, 5 trillion. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And these are the people that are on the list of the rich, Forbes and Fortune magazine. It's all a shell game to distract. So people think these are the rich people, the people that can make a little green blinking cursor and a guy that can come up with a DOS prompt and get 90. They said, yeah, would you like to, we'll let you come up with this DOS prompt and you can rule the computer world with it for 30 years, but then you're going to have to pay us back. You're going to have to be a little vaccine puppet the last 15 years of your life. And you have to put your face all over television. You're going to have to pay us back if we're going to put you in this position, Bill. Do you accept it? Oh, yeah, accept it. Yeah. You got to learn to move your hands all around like crazy when you give an interview, too. That's really important in delivering the spell. So, guys, let me just close with this. This is the big mind-blowing part, which I didn't know. This will be also part of the fairy tale July 4th American Revolution Easter Bunny series of videos coming up. And I have not forgotten about the spiritual declaration of non-dependence. This is not something you slap together quickly. I know we're running out of time, but I'm working on it. I'm diving into the Declaration of Independence, the actual language. I'm going to present that soon, some of the problems with it. It led me to East India. It's just too important. I had to just do this. I'm doing this relatively on the fly, and I wasn't even going to do a video today at all Friday. So I have not forgotten about the most important thing, the declaration of a spiritual declaration of non-dependence, of just another tool to separate ourselves from this reality, which is designed to cut us off from spiritual self. So that is all that's important. I understand this is mostly a screen exercise. I understand that. But get this, guys, to close. The flag of the East India Company there, it's considered the first flag of the United States. It's considered the first flag almost of the United States. George Washington's first flag was called the Grand Union Flag. Look it up. It will be on Wikipedia if you don't believe me. The Grand Union Flag. And it is not exactly what you're looking at there, but it's 95% the same. The only difference is the Union Jack part, the top left, is more squashed. It's more square. It's not as long. It's the exact same thing, though. The exact same Union Jack, the white in the exact same places, the red in the exact same places, and 13 bars. So what? What did he say? The first, the first flag considered to be the first flag of the United States, adopted by George Washington early on in 1776, was basically the exact same flag of the East India Trading Company, the same company that was putting the tea back and forth, and the Boston Tea Party, and they dressed up and threw the tea overboard and set the ships on fire. And, you know, whatever grievances or gripes the American colonies had with the crown, do you think they would have cozied up to the East India Company, or do you think if that whole story is completely legitimate, they would have hated the East India Company the way, you know, guys that put computer parts together in Skokie, you know, hate Microsoft and hate the big companies? I mean, they would have hated East India and all it represented, of course. Anytime the colonies would have tried to do certain trade routes, the East India Company would have wanted in. They would have used strong-arm tactics, thugs, of course. They would have hated the East India Company potentially more than the crown itself, in my opinion. But they adopt the same flag. Okay. Now, the only thing anybody would come up with if they're screaming at their computer right now is mockery, Matt. They're going to take that flag. No. Okay, no. You know, Patton he's Patton, the 3rd Infantry Division or whatever, General Patton, charging across Europe. He's just going to create a swastika for his division. No, come on. It's mockery to Hitler. Come on, you don't do it. It only done because this reality in many roundabout ways has to deliver truth. And when one group's flag is the same as the other group's, there is a connection there, a connection that we likely don't really want to dive into, because I don't think we'd like what we find. All right? I don't know of any way to explain it, but that it's not. If it was the only anomaly or strange thing associated with the American Revolution, then I guess if it was the only thing that bothered me, I'd kind of let it go and find a way to explain it away, like mockery or whatever. But it's not. And if you look up why the flags are the same, you know, Ben Franklin said to George Washington, well, certain flag designs are already available. Some bullcrap. I don't buy it. But again, just anybody, there's a lot of problems, guys, and we'll get into this in the series going forward. American Revolution, July 4th, Easter Bunny has approached the 4th. You have things like the Founding Fathers, none of them arrested. There's a few stories of people you've never heard of being arrested. They would have been arrested, assassinated. You have there's other issues, guys. I don't want to turn the videos coming up into this video. This is on East India Company. But the point in summary is, when you're talking about a mechanism like East India Company that with a world monopoly, the ability to generate wealth like nothing in history, putting tens of millions of Chinese into heroin addiction, just completely taking over all trade in and out of India, Silk Road, whatever. You know, there's the equivalent of trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars is being made. And the main point of this video is, where did all that money go? They just pissed it off all away, just squandered it, and they missed all investment opportunities. Just like Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate, he gets out of the pool or something and he says, "Son, come over here, your graduation. I'm going to give you some advice." Plastics. You know, Dustin Hoffman can get good stock advice as he's waiting for the party to clear out, which is Mrs. Robinson waiting behind. He can know to put his money into Dow Chemical and DuPont, but you know, these guys that ruled the world, they have no ability to spot trends. They create trends and they control the world's politicians. So there's, to my opinion, there's a group of I would always say, and I'm changing my opinion on the fly in this video, that I would always say that they would have trillions and trillions, but because of their tie to the Federal Reserve System and controlling the entire world's money, what did Rothschild say? I don't care who makes the laws. I care who makes the money. I don't think they do have any money that you can point to, or in a bank account. They just take whatever they need whenever they need it, and in that case, they have, assets and things like that, but there might not be liquid money, because why would you need it if you're embedded into the inner workings of the Federal Reserve System? And please don't think, guys, anybody listening to this, please don't think that the European Central Bank, well, Matt, the European Central Bank is autonomous from the Federal Reserve, and the Bank of Japan makes its own decisions. And oh, sure. If that no way. It's always been one world system to me. And even if that was the case, because of, some recent turmoil like 2007, 2008, that, again, that's all cooked up as well, in my opinion. But those central banks, at least by now, would have been completely synced up to the same AI supercomputer that injects money around the world to keep everything afloat. I mean, if anything was real, based on what's happening now with the CV, the entire world economy would have melted down a long time ago. I mean, the CV thing proves what I've been saying for years. The CV thing is proof of what I've been saying, that the central banks are all tied together. It's just a computer injecting money. All the airlines would be out of business if things were real. Nobody would be going anywhere because the airlines would be completely out of business worldwide. They didn't have any money during good times, guys. You've heard of stories about TWA goes down, Pan Am goes down. Trust me, airlines, they say could operate for just a few weeks if they have troubles, where a strike could cause a whole airline. They didn't have any. Airline business was always a horrendous long-term investment anyway. They didn't have any money saved up. They're not like Apple with hundreds of billions in the bank. Airlines always were just the money comes in, they pay their bills, no extra money. That's how they would all be out of business worldwide, with maybe one or two exceptions like Southwest or a few. They would all be out of business. The fact that they're all operating, they're just getting the money. There's probably been 20 or 30 companies that would have failed, big companies that would have failed based on the CV thing. They just get the injections of the money from the Federal Reserve System, just doling out trillions a week, all off books. And what's happening now just proves what I said about how the world economy and how the stock markets work. It's basically like a Sims video game, just managed everything's managed on a supercomputer, and money is injected wherever it's needed, whenever it's needed. But I guess I'm getting a little off the topic here, so I'll wrap it up here. Thanks, guys.